made it online. Awesome. Kia ora, Helen. Brahms here, coming from Colorado Springs, Colorado, in the middle of a thunderstorm. Well, I can hear the thunder rolling around. Yeah, we've got rain on the roof. I've got ears out the side here, little flicks. I was just putting the hair back off the face. How has your winning Wednesday been? Had a really, really good day. I keep getting all these messages going, thunderstorm warning expires, flashing on my screen. So please excuse me if you see me swipe up. So how was your winning Wednesday? For your mindset, did you have the mindset of a champion today? From all the struggles that you've been through, all the obstacles you have overcome, have you found have you discovered that you are actually a champion for being able to get through those challenges, through those obstacles, or around them, over them, under them, etc. So did you find that champion mindset? On your business, did you call a client and celebrate a victory with them? You know, a victory that they had, not you, a victory for your client. And for the fun thing, did you celebrate a family member's victory over illness, over a new job, over maybe it was a contract that they got at work or something, or a sales that they closed, something that they had that they wanted to celebrate, or maybe it was their birthday. Something as simple as their birthday. Maybe they got engaged. Who knows? Maybe it was a wedding. So did you have fun with Winning Wednesday? So what wins did you have today? I want to hear everybody's wins. What wins did I have today? Oh, I had an amazing training session this morning. Hence the goop on the face. It was a very good training session with that today. I had an incredible training session this afternoon, learning about the compensation plan for one of the businesses I have, and it just blew my mind. It was like, wow! I didn't realize that when you think of the different ways that you could make money with this business, how quickly those little pieces all added up to give you big things. And you know, I've been in other businesses before in the past, and this one just blew my mind with the different ways that we could make money. And it was amazing. So I consider that a huge win, because now it's given me a completely new outlook on everything, and how I'm approaching this business. And it's sort of like no holds barred. If you want to know what it's all about, just send me a private message and I can talk to you about that. So we have a genealogy question. So starting to ask people to send me your genealogy questions, your family search questions. What questions do you have about genealogy, so that we can educate everybody else? So my questions today is, what is the difference between family history and genealogy? Is there a difference? Yes, there is. So your family history is a narrative. It is the story of your family. There's a lot of information that is available. So you use the genealogy. The genealogy is basically a summary of all the dates, who's who, what jobs they had, when they got married, when they were born, when and where they were born, when and where they got married, who they got married to, when and where their spouse was born, where they've lived over the years, the occupations that they've had, when they passed away, when and where they passed away, the cause of their death. In some cases, we're able to find that information out. So the genealogy is more the facts side of the thing. The family history is taking that genealogy information and putting it into a narrative that becomes like the story of your family. If you think history is got that little word in there called story, isn't that cool? You guys never noticed that before? So, and the genealogy, of course, explains links between different family members with your family tree, how it's all lined up and everything else. Whereas the family history will not only talk about take that information and put it into a story form, it will also incorporate any stuff that was going on, any history things that were going on in the area where they were living at the time. Like if they were in late 1800s in England, and when the government was doing the call for people to, wanting to colonize New Zealand, for example, what was the history going on around that time, and why would they choose that? The government subsidized some people to go from England down to New Zealand. Some subsidized them to go from England down to Australia to help colonize that. So there's different reasons why people left. My husband's family left the Ukraine and Lithuania because they were Jewish, they were being persecuted. So it's winding those moments in time and in history with your family history and coming up with a narrative for it. So that is the difference between a family history and genealogy. Family history is the story of the family, the narrative, with a lot of historical facts thrown in there, historical information thrown in there as well as your family history and things. And then and a lot of people will, like, for example, what was the name? One of my ancestors. There's a guy in England who wrote a book based on a family whose one of the female relatives in there married one of my great-grandfathers. I can't remember how many generations. It was like three or four great grandfathers. And why can't I remember the name? Damn. So he wrote the story about that family and included in there the genealogy as well, because he had portions of the trees in there when he was talking about certain levels of genealogy. He would take, okay, we're going to talk about these generations here, and here's their story. And it's a great Longland? Begins with L. Longland. I think it's Longland. And so he wrote the history of this family, like where they had lived over the years, when they had moved, who got married to who. So all of the genealogy facts are taken into account when writing the narrative. It's just that when writing the narrative, we're taking more of those things, and then, between this year and this year they lived in this particular place here. This is what was going on in that place. This is the history, and it might give you a little bit of history about the town or the city or the country that they lived in and what was going on in there. And then they left there and moved to, so it's very interesting to read some of these books. I don't know if I will ever write a family history book or a narrative for the family history, but I'm definitely pulling all the facts together and everything else. But sometimes I think, man, it would be really cool to incorporate some of these into the stories, or even finding a way to. No, I don't know. I wouldn't fictionalize that. No, but there's no reason why I couldn't use some of the family stories to create a fictional story. That would be interesting. Maybe. Because, see, I got inspired to write a historical piece about Ketchikan, but at the same time tie it into modern day. So you've got the historical story going on one side, and you've got the modern day story discovering what's going on in the history. There's a story I've been rolling around in my head since I was in Ketchikan back in May of 2018, when I was reading about Creek Street and the history of Ketchikan and all of that, and the stuff I've learned since then. And I've had this story rolling around in my head. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to do it, but it was sort of like, here is, in the same book, you would look at, oh, hello. She's checking on her bone. Your true stick's still there. Then we'll just back up and go away. Oh no, we're staying for snuggles. Look, you gonna say hello? You camera shy. So anyway, back to May of 2018 when I was up in Ketchikan. So I was reading all this history about Creek Street and Ketchikan and all that, and I've done a lot of research on Ketchikan since then. So one of my stories is there's a period piece that takes place in Ketchikan in the early 1900s, and then it's tied to modern day with a family in the modern day thing who is researching the genealogy of their family and can't find the link. There's a missing link somewhere in there. And so you're reading about what's happening at that time in history, about the family that they're trying to research, and then you've got modern day where they're trying to find the information about this family back in the early 1900s in Ketchikan, but there's a missing link in there. She can only trace them back so far, and then she comes across a big stumbling block, like they're never mentioned before then. So it's I've got the plots and everything all written out and everything else. I just got to figure out how to get it started. But you can do stuff like that. But that's different. That's a fictional portion. but the family history is, it's a living, breathing story. It is based on fact, and you are putting factual history into there. So it is a non-fiction piece. It's it's weaving your ancestors' experiences, their lives into historical pieces, into historical things that were happening at the time. Just putting in there that they lived in this house from 1853 to 1874, and then they moved to this county, or they moved to this parish, and this parish today is now known as whatever. And, they moved to this parish. At this parish, they were going through this information and da 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 da. When you watch shows like Genealogy Roadshow and Who Do You Think You Are, if you listen to how the genealogists present the information, it's not just showing them the information that is there. They're also weaving in the historical times, what was happening at that time. There was one, for example, Susan Sarandon. I think it was Susan Sarandon. Was it her? Might have been somebody else. Oh, what was it? I think it was... No, it was Susan Sarandon. She was trying to find out about why she was the way she was, and her mother never talked about her mother. So Susan Sarandon's grandmother, I think. Yes. And it turned out her grandmother used to be a dance hall girl. And so she used to perform, in the dance halls that Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. and all those sort of people used to hang out in New York. And her mother never spoke of her mother. And so when she's discovering the genealogy and things like this, these stories are coming out, and they're talking about what it was like in New York at that time when her grandmother would have been a dance hall girl. So it was very interesting to hear those stories. Other stories, the one that hits me the most, that I remember the most, is Chris O'Donnell and his story about wanting to know why family was so important to him, or was it something that's always been carried down through the years? And he found out it actually was. And he would go back and find that, some great-grandfather had left different wars to go home because he was needed at home, and stories about things that happened along the way to him, like he was going home because there was nobody left to run the family business, and so he resigned so one of his great grandfathers resigned their commission and went home, and on the way home they met this mother sitting in a ditch with her son who had just passed away, and so his great grandfather picked up the took the woman with him and her dead son, and went and helped her bury her son and all that. So there was a sense of duty and things. And one of my favorite pieces, though, is one of his great-grandfathers was at Fort McHenry during the Battle of 1812. And then one of his great-grandfathers in the Civil War resigned his commission to go home, but then years later returned to the Smithsonian Museum his sword and a couple of other pieces that he had taken with him that he was supposed to turn in when he resigned his commission, along with a letter apologizing for not handing them in when he resigned his commission. And so the people at the Smithsonian are explaining to him about the times of the Civil War and when they resigned their commission, what they had to do, about the time where he was based and all of that, where he was stationed and all of that sort of thing. And he actually got to hold the sword that had been his 2 or 3 times great-grandfather. So when you watch those shows and they're meeting these genealogists and stuff, the genealogists are passing along what was going on in history at that time and saying, during this time in this battle, this is what was going on. And then your 3 times great-grandfather, he resigned, he got this letter from home that said, so-and-so passed away and we've got nobody left to run the family business. Can you come home? And whatever reason it was that he had to resign his commission. So it's interesting hearing these times in history as they related to the person that they were looking for, what was going on around that area. He got to learn about the Battle of 1812 at Fort McHenry and about the piles of bodies that were at the base of the flagpole, holding that flagpole up so that the American flag so the Stars and Stripes would stay up. And their thing was that flag has to stay standing. And hearing these stories about it. So if you watch those shows, when they give the facts, but then they also tell them what was happening at the time and some of the experiences their ancestor may have been having. So that's family history. It is telling the story while weaving in the historical stuff that was going on at the time, the conditions that they may have lived in, what was happening politically in the area, what was happening in a wartime, in a war zone, what would the conditions be like that they were living in. And some of them, they were quite poor. They would have been living in this type of a house, or they were of medium income, which would have been whatever it was back then, $50 a year or something, but they're weaving in these stories of history and it's all factual. So that's family history. Genealogy is just the facts. It's how are you connected to these people? What were their names? Where dates and places they were born, dates and places that they got married and who they got married to, dates and places that they died, where they're buried. That's your genealogy. It's the facts about your ancestors, and it's basically a summary of their lives just in facts. Whereas the family history weaves those historical moments into those times and gives you a glimpse into what it was like to live there, which is why we've also, after we've done the genealogy, we offer you the In the Footsteps of Your Ancestors, which is where you can then go and we can plan trips for you to places where your ancestors come from, so you can go and see those places firsthand. Yes, they may have changed over the years, but in some areas the houses that they live in are still standing. And it may have been like 3 or 4 generations ago, 4 or 5 generations ago, and those houses are still standing, so you get to see where they lived, and you get to hear from the locals some history about the area and what was going on at the time. And it may even give you a little more glimpse into why your family left there to immigrate somewhere else. So great question. Wish I can remember who asked. I forgot to write down who asked me, so I apologize. But thank you very much for your question. If you have questions about genealogy, please just private message me the questions. I'm happy to answer them. And so tonight, I thank the mysterious person whose name totally escapes me right now for asking the question of what's the difference between family history and genealogy. So I hope you had a super fantastic, sparkling winning Wednesday. I am off. I have another call to go get on very soon. And I've got a lot of stuff I need to do before that call. So have a super fantastic, sparkling winning Wednesday, and we will catch you guys tomorrow for Thankful Thursdays. He konera.